Hello! Today we're going to talk about creating modern lists and views in SharePoint. This is right at the heart of SharePoint. The most core concept in SharePoint is the concept of lists. And there has been a lot of updates on this front, especially recently. There have been many improvements in how this works to make things easier and provide more flexibility. So whether you're a SharePoint veteran or whether you're new to SharePoint, you're sure to get some useful information on how to work with setting up lists and setting up views in that list with this video. So now let's get SharePoint smart. Okay, here I am in my SharePoint Online environment, and we're just going to jump right to it. So to create a new SharePoint list, you can do this from different screens. If you're at the home page of your site, you can just click on the New drop-down and select List. And you can also do this from the Site Content screen as well. So we're going to go ahead and do that and get started. Okay, so there are many concepts and settings related to lists and views and columns. We're going to focus on the most key settings in this video. So go ahead and select blank list and then just give it a name. In my example, I'm going to do projects tracking. And by default, it says show in site navigation. You can go ahead and leave that checked. That just means it's going to create a link to your new list on the left side navigation. Okay, now we're going to first go to list settings and we're going to go to advanced settings. So go to the gear in the upper right and then click on list settings, and in the general settings area, the third link says advanced settings. We're going to cover a few settings here real quick. If your list does not need to use attachments, you can go ahead and disable that setting if you want to, or you can leave it enabled. We'll stick with the default. And there's lots of settings on the screen. We're just covering a few that apply to some key aspects of our list and our views. Quick property editing means that users will have the ability to edit records in an Excel-style grid. That can be handy, but also it could be problematic. It allows you to do bulk updates easily, and there is a risk that users could make a mistake. We'll leave that turned on for now, but that's something in some cases where you may want to turn that off. One setting we need to make sure is that list experience is set to new experience. So be sure it's set that way. All the concepts in our video are going to be applying to our modern experience, what they refer to as the new list experience. You can click on the name of your list at the top of the screen. It'll return you back to that original view. Every list, when it's first created, begins with the default all items view and one field, which is the title field, which is shown in your view. There are some other default fields that are automatically created, such as ID. Generally, you don't display those in your view. So let's go ahead and rename the title field to something more meaningful to us. So click on the column header and we're going to go to column settings, rename, and instead of title, I want this to say project. Okay. So that's just a simple text field in which we'll enter the name of a project. And now we're going to go ahead and create some more fields. So we're going to demonstrate using settings directly from the list view, which in most cases is faster and easier. So just click on this Add Column link and we're going to start and go through each of the main field types. So we'll start with the text field. And we're going to call this summary. There are different options you can check out. In our case, we're really going to stick to the defaults for our demonstration. So I can just click Save, and you can see that it's immediately added to my view. So now we're going to do a choice column. So select Choice, then Next, and then I'm going to give this the name of Category, and we'll give it a few different choices. So I'm going to do Technology, and then Sales, and Marketing. You can see it applies some color formatting to it. Again, we're just going to stick with the defaults. If you wanted to change those, you can click on this color palette button and you can change the colors if you like. The next field we're going to create is a date field. So we're going to do add column, this time pick date and time. And we're simply going to call this field due. We'll stick with the default settings. By default, it does not show a time with it. You could turn that on if you want to, but we're just doing some basic setup right now. The next field we're going to create is a multi-line text field, and that is going to be using default settings once again. I'm going to call that description and save, and they're just appearing from left to right as I add them. The next thing we're going to do is a person field. This field refers to user accounts that have been created in SharePoint specifically. My person field is going to be called manager, and I'm again sticking with the defaults. Then we're going to do a number field. We're just working our way down the list. This number field is going to be called quantity. I'm sticking with default settings. You do have many options here, but for our purposes, we can just stick with what it gives us out of the box. And then we're going to do a yes/no field. You could also think of this as a checkbox. And this will be called updates. And default will say no. Okay, so we've already put together a basic SharePoint list. Now, there are other columns you can create, which I won't cover in this video, which you can explore on your own. These other types of columns are used a little bit less commonly. So you can see in the drop-down, we've also got options for hyperlink. Currency is just like a number field, except of course that's referring to money. Location is seldom used. It's an interesting option. It will give you an autocomplete picker, which will pull address information off the web. So that's worth checking out if you have a location-related list. Image allows you, of course, to upload an image to the field. Of course, that's handy if you need that information. Managed metadata, that would be an advanced concept that would be rarely used. And then lookup would allow you to have a choice field that is referring to another list in your SharePoint site where you already have a set of values that you want to reference. So those are the main column types. Okay, so now you know how to create a list and you know how to create the columns for your list. The next thing I want to do is create a couple of dummy records. We want to populate our list. Otherwise, some of these concepts aren't going to make a lot of sense to us. So I'll go ahead and put in some data for that now. So this is just a side panel form that opens up, and I'm just arbitrarily filling in some information. I'll put in my name for manager. And we'll say yes to updates. Okay, there's one record. Let's go ahead and do one more. Do technology for this one. Again, I'm just picking some arbitrary values. Having this dummy information helps. right, I'll put my name in here again. And no updates on this one. Okay, so we've got a couple of dummy records. So that's all set. Now, if we did want to change the fields or make adjustments, there is the list settings screen, which is always available to us. This has been around for a very long time. And so many settings are duplicated, or in some cases you can apply settings in even 3 different ways. You're always welcome to go to this view. Most of what we're going to focus on in the video today is how to make those settings changes directly from this view. Now, the first thing you want to know is how to create views. So we've created our list, we've created fields in our list, and we're looking at the default all items view. What we can do very easily is create more views. The easiest way to do that is to use the save view as. And what that does is make a copy of this. So I'll say my second view and click save. And that literally just cloned the original all items view with the settings that it currently has. But now I can apply settings independently on the second view. You can also use the option to create a new view, and there are some special templates which we won't cover in this video. Generally, you don't need to create views that way, so I do recommend as your normal go-to method to just use save view as, and you can create as many views as you want. That's something SharePoint handles very well. Okay, now the list settings screen, the list view settings screen, there are a couple of ways. We're going to focus on settings that we can apply directly in the view, but you can also always go to Edit Current View. Now when you do that, SharePoint does something that I find a little bit frustrating. It pops open a new browser tab, and if you keep going into the screen, you'll get more and more tabs. So usually what I like to do as a matter of habit is just close one of those tabs immediately so I don't end up with a lot of tabs in my browser. Now this is what I would call the classic list view settings screen. And there are some settings that we're going to cover which you can only do on this screen. But many of these settings can be applied instead from the modern SharePoint list view. And so we're going to run through all of those different kinds of settings now. Okay. So the first thing we're going to look at is showing and hiding views. There is a key button in the view that you are going to want to tap into a lot because it allows us to make quick adjustments. And that's for making all kinds of different settings. So let's cover show or hide columns. Very simple concept. You can just check or uncheck columns in this screen, click apply. That will immediately apply those settings and update your view. Okay, so now we see the modified, which shows the date time stamp of when the record was last modified. So that's a very easy thing to do. So you can just scroll over and click the add column to get access to that. Now reordering fields is the next concept. This has become much easier. You used to only be able to do this by editing the current view, and you would just go into that screen and you click on drop downs to reorder that. So if I go to edit the current view, you'll see these position from left drop downs, and then you would check off the columns that you want. That certainly will work. However, it's not the most convenient way to do that. We have a much faster, easier way to do that now. So the most preferred method is just to simply drag your column left and right. Not only will that change the order of the fields, that is saved into the view and will stay that way permanently. Another really easy method is just to go back to the add column, click show or hide columns, and you can either use the up and down arrows to move the fields up and down, or what's even easier is just to click and hold and you can drag your columns order around in this view, click apply, and your settings are immediately applied. So those two methods directly in the list view are much faster and easier than the old way of doing that through the classic view settings screen. So there you go. There's show and hide fields, and reordering the fields in the view. Now, the next thing we're going to look at is modifying the widths of the columns. And to do that, it's not immediately apparent, but if you hover between the column headers, you'll see that there's a handle control which you can adjust. And what you'll see is I can move that back and forth. And that will actually modify the view. Notice that when I did that, an asterisk appears in the upper right next to my view name. That's letting me know that this view has been modified but has not been saved. This is a special situation where in order for that to become permanent and applied for all users, you do need to edit the current view, and then you need to just click OK to save it. You can see the asterisk is gone and the column width has been narrowed. There is another method they provide for this, which I don't find is flexible. You can click on widen column or click on narrow column, and that also affects things. But it's so much easier to just grab this handle and set the column width as you wish. So that's how you can adjust column widths. Note that you can only make a column but so narrow. So I believe the limit is at 100 pixel, the minimum limit. So you can't make it any more narrow than that. But generally that's going to facilitate what you want to do quite well. All right, so the next thing we want to cover is working on totals. So we may want to aggregate information, and there are a lot of options available to us. So if I go to the column header and then click on totals, I can select from all kinds of different options. Count is going to give me the total number of records. Average, I'm not going to explain a lot of this, is just basic math concepts. We've got average, max, minimum, sum, which we'll select, and then if you're doing something really technical, you could even get into standard deviation and variance. So I'll do sum. You can see what it does. It just shows an aggregated total on the bottom. As with all cases, I just need to make sure that when I do this, I always edit the view and hit OK to save it, and that will make sure these changes are permanent and all users will see that. So that's how you can get aggregate information. I can do that on any of those numeric columns. In my case, I really just have that one number column, so there aren't any other totaling functions that I need to do. If I just want to get a count, I can do that by putting this. So I now can see I have 2 records and I have a sum of 900 there. Okay, the next thing we're going to look at is sorting and filtering. So I can, if I quickly want to adjust my view, I can click on options in the column header, but this will not permanently affect the view. If I want to permanently sort or filter on this view and have it remain, I need to go into the classic list view settings screen. So I can do edit current view, and then there is a section for sorting and filtering. So I can actually apply multiple values. I can have compound conditions for this. So I'm going to go in here and say I want this to be sorted by project ascending. And then additionally, if I wanted to, I'm not going to apply this, but I can filter out according to various conditions. So I could say something like where quantity is greater than 400 or something like that. And then you've got a Boolean operator where you can do and or conditions and have more complex settings for that. So that's sort and filter. Let me get rid of the filter. I don't want to do that, but I will keep my sort. And as always is the case, once I click OK, it will sort that for me. Okay, and then the last thing we want to get into is grouping settings. So again, I can do grouping from here, but it's not going to stick in the view. So I could do group by project, but that's not going to remain in place in the view. If I leave this screen and come back to it, it will not be there anymore. Okay, so in order to set that permanently, I do need to use the classic view settings screen. So to get to that, I just need to go and edit the current view, and you'll find a group settings section. So scroll down your page and then find the group by option, and then you can do a grouping. So I can group by project. I do recommend that you pick expanded. By default, it's going to make it collapse. I find that generally it's more user-friendly if you make it default to expanded. Unlike the setting I applied previously, this is saved in the view. In other words, if I go to another view or another area in SharePoint and I return back, those groupings are always going to be there. Notice something interesting, that when I have grouping turned on and totals, it gives me aggregated information by group. Those are these gray bars, and then also aggregated information for the entire set, which is shown at the bottom. Additional to this, you can do formatting, and formatting's fun. It allows us to do visual representations of our data. So right now, for example, in the update section, that's just a boring gray check mark. If you go to column settings, format this column, you can select one of the options there. So I did format, yes, no. You can edit the styles and colors however you wish, but that's a way to improve the appearance of that view. There's all kinds of different format options available. You can even do bars and things like that. So I could do data bars and save, and it just gives you a visual representation of things you see in the column. Now, if you like formatting, there is additional templates that are available to you at my website, which is SharePointDashboards.com. I hope you'll check that out. There is a free sign-up available that allows you to get access to 20 free templates. You just need to click on the Get Started button at the top, then click on Free, and you can enter your name and email address. You'll get your free login. You'll get access to 20 free templates, and you'll see lots of very cool things you can do with your list views and columns in SharePoint Online. Okay, so whether you're new to SharePoint or you're a SharePoint veteran, I hope you picked up on some tips. For those of you who are new, I recommend that you stick to the basics and just do some practice, and then as you get more experience, you can continue to explore. And the best way to explore is by experimenting and trying different settings. For you SharePoint veterans out there like me who've been around SharePoint for a long time, we know that SharePoint has evolved, and generally we're all creatures of habit. What I would emphasize to you is that there are settings and features that make the approach you use to adjust in those views easier. So especially when it comes to reordering columns, showing and hiding the columns, that is much easier to do now through the modern list view. So hopefully you can tap into that and be able to update those views a lot faster, and it'll just make your life easier and help you be a lot more efficient in SharePoint. So I hope you found that information handy. I hope you have a better idea and a better handle on how to work with creating SharePoint lists, and then creating those views, and then updating the views to get them to look just exactly how you want. Thanks for your time, and good luck.